Opinions expressed on this radio program do not necessarily reflect the views of this radio station.
Todd never sugarcoats it. Does he tell it straight? You bet. Does he deliver with a sense of humor? Always.
I always start my Sunday mornings off listening to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. It has tons of information, and he has such a great sense of humor.
My friends and I always tune in to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show.
Hold on tight. Don't let go. It's time for the Todd L. Levitt Law Show.
Welcome to the Todd L. Levitt Marijuana Law Podcast. Good morning, good evening, and good night. I'm yours truly, attorney Todd L. Levitt, broadcasting and podcasting from the middle of the mitten in the Black Diamond Group mothership in a beautiful green nutrient field. Pure Michigan, baby, born in the D, Berkeley High, class of 83, Craig Russell, the muscle. How you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm trying to warm up, man. It was, boy, was it cold. That polar vortex really was just crazy cold. The, what was it? They called it the deep freeze of the generation. Like, they haven't seen low temperatures. It was like the coldest in Chicago it's ever been, ever, in recorded time. Just crazy.
Yeah, I did some really interesting things. I took a bottle of Verner's, opened it up, and just shook it out and threw it in the air, and it turned into ginger ale ice cubes. It was pretty cool how that worked out.
You should have videoed it. Did you take a video of it?
Nah, you know how I feel about that. Come on.
But still, that's the fun stuff, man. But
Craig, it's Super Bowl weekend.
Yes, it is. Who are you rooting for in the big game? Do you even know who's playing?
Go Blue, baby. I love the Rams. I mean, I truly love the Rams as a young team, but I'm all about Michigan and Tom Brady, and I love Kronk. And Edelman was a MAC player, a quarterback for the MAC, and you and I graduated from Central Michigan University, as did Antonio Brown.
That's right.
And Fisher, who's with Kansas City, and there's a whole bunch of NFL players out there. But so fire up Chip. So I've got to go with New England.
Think New England. Well, they did a thing.
Because of Tom Brady.
They do a thing where they play the Madden game, and they play the two Super Bowl teams and see how it's going to all work out. And they've done this for the past 15 years. And of the 15 times they've played the Madden game, 12 out of the 15, they got it exactly. They got it right. The team was going to win. And 3 years ago, they not only picked the right team that won, they actually had the exact score. The Patriots won 28-24. That was like 3 Super Bowls ago. They got it right. This year, they say the Rams are going to win 30-27. So we'll see if the Madden game is right, if it's going to be who wins the Super Bowl.
Well, that's why I opened up with docking into the fire, because I think the Rams are going right into the fire. So I'm just saying.
Man.
I got to go with Brady because, he was the Michigan quarterback. So go Blue, baby. And I love Dockin, by the way. Dockin, I think they're just one of the most underrated bands of that generation. I love Dockin.
Top five favorite bands? Top 20 favorite bands?
Top 20.
Okay.
Top
okay.
20.
All right. I got you.
But hey, it has been cold out. Last weekend after the show, I headed up to TC to meet up with Dave Kate with my fat bike. Kate actually grooms the Vasa Trail there at Timber Ridge, helps Gordy out. Yeah. So Kate took myself and Cindy Kress on a 10-mile single track shred through the beautiful pine forest of, Traverse City, Michigan, and northern Michigan on a fat bike. I mean, it's just stellar up there. So big shout out to Kate, Vinny, Andrew, the entire Kate family there.
I'll tell you this much. Of course, us here in Michigan, we know all about how beautiful the northern part of the state is and the northern part of the Lower Peninsula. If you are listening to the podcast from all over the country or all over the world, some of the most beautiful land in the whole planet Earth area is in the northern part of the Lower Peninsula. You should see it sometime. And that Vasa Trail is fantastic. The North American Vasa's in a couple of weeks. That Vasa Trail is beautiful, that land up there. So
absolutely. And Kate signed me up for the Margie Giza camp. They even paid for me. I paid him back, and so I'm looking forward to that this summer also.
Okay.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Todd.
We have a huge show coming up for the listeners, so I hope everybody stays tuned. But I had some truck issues last week.
Oh, what happened?
Yeah, my Chevy Silverado, apparently I did not know this. It's happened for many of us Chevy Silverado owners. My traction control got jammed up. So I'm heading up to Grayling to go to court, and I'm halfway there on 127. And it was, you know what the weather's like. It was cold. It was freezing. And, it was icy. And all of a sudden, on my truck, it locks up. The traction lights show up on the dashboard, and my power went down to 40 miles an hour. So I'm thinking, great, how am I going to get to court on time? It took, thank goodness I left like 3 hours early, and I got there right on time. But on the way home, I had to take Old 127 from Grayling all the way back to Mount Pleasant. What a beautiful, I had never been on 127, Old 127 or Old 27 for the entire distance there, because I'm always shooting up the highway. And as you just mentioned, what a beautiful ride it was, albeit it was 40 miles an hour. But the good guys at O'Reilly's in Grayling totally helped me out. Ken, Justin, and Jake, good men up there.
Good.
I went into the O'Reilly's, said, hey, I have a problem. They diagnosed it. They helped me out, and it allowed me to get back to Mount Pleasant, where my good friend Jason at Mount Pleasant Tire, figured out what the problem was, and I've been back in the truck ever since. So big shout out to all the guys up there in Grayling, my buddy Jason, and everybody at Mount Pleasant Tire. I appreciate all you do, and that's where I'm at.
Okay, I'm glad you got everything worked out, but that is a beautiful drive, even if you're going 40 miles an hour. That whole Old 27 stretch there between Grayling.
Oh, man.
You go through like a Houghton Lake area and Higgins Lake, and you go through Harrison and through that area. It's a beautiful drive. It really is.
And here's my complaint. I do have a complaint.
Okay.
And as far as a follow-up to the medical complaint I had last week.
Oh, yeah.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned, because I have an appointment coming up this week. And, so we'll update the listeners in regards to what that's all about.
As my complaint is, are you going to recap the complaint a little bit for people who didn't hear it last week?
It had to do with a doctor's office and the staff making medical decisions in regards to one of my children who owed a very small bill. They canceled their medical care, and it's my opinion that the doctor had no idea that his staff made this decision, and that opens up any doctor to tons of liability. I got a lot of responses in regards to that.
Okay.
But my complaint is this, to my fellow truckers out there, not the 18-wheelers like Biker Bob, but just to the men and women who do drive around in their Chevys or their Fords or their Chryslers. I had to drive a car for 2 days last week in the middle of that vortex. Oh. And when you drive a truck for 20 years, such as I have, and then you get into a small car, it makes you really nervous. And, I wasn't sure. I just wanted to take my time. And more often than not, I would have these big trucks like my own tailgating me. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say to all the men and women who drive trucks as I do, go get in a car and drive around in a car for 2 days so you recall what it's like to drive in snow and ice. And these, it was just one or two occasions I would have a truck right on my tail in this real small car I was in, Craig. But I got to tell you, I was not comfortable driving that little car. I missed my truck. So that's my complaint is trucks. And my complaint is truck owners, and most of us respect other vehicles on the road. You always get one or two who don't. And I found when I'm in my truck, I'm not tailgated, usually by someone who's really young, possibly who's in a hurry. Okay. But when I was in this car for 2 days straight, I noticed that trucks such as my own were coming up on my tail too often, more often than not. And I was a little disappointed there.
Well, I'll tell you this much. That's one of the things that I always cringe at. I've got a Jeep. It's not the biggest of Jeeps or anything like that, but I'll be driving by and you'll be on, snow-covered, hard-packed road that you shouldn't be going 70 miles an hour on. And all of a sudden, one of these big trucks will come flying by because they either have big tires or they have four-wheel drive and they think that they can go through anything. And I would never want to see.
Though.
I know they can't.
Ice is ice.
That's exactly right. No matter how big your tires are, no matter how many four-wheel drive you have going on, ice is ice. And you just need to slow down in this weather, man. You got to just be a little more careful. And people tailgating you, they shouldn't do that. And hopefully that opens your eyes so you don't do that to anyone else when you're driving your big truck.
I mean, it happened on 2 occasions, and it just was. I was just not happy about that at all.
Yeah, I can understand. Totally get it.
But I'll tell you, spending time in Grayling, Michigan, we have a lot of listeners from out of state, and we have the majority of our listeners are from Michigan. And, if you've never been to Grayling, get up to Grayling, check out the Beer's Den Pizzeria right there on East Michigan Avenue. The Beer's Den, my friend Bill Gannon owns it. Bill Gannon used to be in radio group.
Yeah, used to own the Gannon radio group, yep.
Love Bill Gannon, great man, and he's done such a great job with Dawson and Stevens classic 50s diner and soda fountain shop right there, right next to his pizza, Bear's Den Pizza. There's actually Fred Bear, Bear Archery, has a lot of history there, and there's a lot of bows on the walls there, so get up to Bear's Den for sure. Big shout out to Bill and his entire staff up there. They now have a banquet hall that separates the 2 restaurants. So pretty cool place, Grayling, Michigan. But Craig, when we come back from break, we have some hemp to talk about. And I have a quote to tease the audience so if they can guess who this is.
Okay.
So this was a quote from a famous man. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
This is what he said, and it's in regards to hemp. And I quote, "I don't want to overstate this," and this is him talking. "I don't know whether it's going to be the next tobacco or not, but I do think it has a lot of potential." So who said that, Craig? Who said, "I don't know whether it's going to be the next tobacco or not, but I do think it has a lot of potential"?
I have an idea who it could be, but we'll wait till after the break.
Keep that thought.
We'll do it after the break.
You got it. Take us out and bring us back. This is attorney Todd L. Levitt with an important message.
What's that, Todd?
Craig, mark your calendar. April 20th, 2019, the nation's premier event for everything cannabis and hemp is descending on the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort located right here in Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
What's that, Todd?
420 Canna Expo will feature the industry's most knowledgeable professionals from cultivation, medical, recreational, research, staffing, canna tourism, smoke shops, grow shops, merchandisers, glass makers, and more. Every facet of the industry will be represented on April 20th, 2019 at the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort. For more information on attending, sponsorship, and exhibitor space, log on to 420cannaexpo.com. That's 420cannaexpo.com. And stay tuned to our podcast for more information.
You weave your spell, your eyes they beckon me. Your lips they speak lies and misery. I know it's wrong, but I can't turn away. The flames draw near, they're telling me to stay. Into the fire, I'm falling. Into the fire, I'm falling.
Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. Coming back strong once again with my top 10 all-time groups. Way underrated, Dokken, Into the Fire. I love everything about Dokken. I mean, they just completely just tore it up, Craig.
I know you love the Dokken. I know you're one of your top 50 bands.
Don Dokken, love him.
I know.
Double
Don.
D, baby.
Yep. That's surprising. You being T.O. Double D and he being Double D. There you go.
Yeah, so who said I don't want to overstate this? I don't know whether it's going to be the next tobacco or not, but I do think it has a lot of potential. Who said that, Craig?
For hemp, that's the context is hemp. He doesn't think the hemp is going to be the next tobacco, but I am going to guess and say our famous president from the early 20th century, Teddy Roosevelt, said that.
Teddy Roosevelt said, I think it has a lot of potential. No, you are wrong.
Oh, okay.
Mitch McConnell said that.
Really?
Senator Mitch McConnell said that in regards to the Farm Bill and his home state jumping aboard and reviving hemp production and processing. And I got to tell you, Kentucky is way out front.
Yeah.
And Kentucky farmers grew thousands of acres of hemp, this past year. And dozens of Kentucky processors are turning the raw product into multitude of products. And so that was Mitch McConnell. Craig, I got to tell you, as a defense attorney of 25 years and somebody who's a cannabis consultant, you and I have both seen what has taken place in the state of Michigan, which they say is the second largest market outside of the great state of California as far as cannabis and whatnot. I feel that hemp is the way to go. And hemp is right there in front of you, folks. And the resurgence of hemp following the Farm Bill's passage is going to be where, the economy is going to flourish. So if you or somebody is into farming or are into any type of production or has an entrepreneurial spirit, hemp. Look hemp up online. Hemp has been around for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, I don't know if you knew this, Craig, but the Colonials hundreds of years ago, they were required to grow hemp. Did you know that?
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. Hemp was an extremely well-known product to the early colonial Americans, and it made different types of headlines than it has in the last century prior to this one here.
Sure.
Hemp farmers, there were large farmers such as Jefferson. He was a big farmer. General George Washington, our first president, he was into hemp farming. I mean, hemp was a huge part of the early America, and hemp was among the first plants that humans cultivated. And I believe the ancient Chinese used it for pottery, rope. Of course, we know about rope, but it's been around for thousands and thousands of years.
And I know what you were talking about, early colonials, using whenever these people went on boats, vessels and things like that, the rope to hoist up the sails, all this cloth product, all had to be made by hemp. Now, my question to you is, was that something that they were growing also in England before the settlers came over? And is this something that started as we got into America? Because, when the Pilgrims came over from England, they were escaping religious persecution. Was hemp part of that?
Craig, I have no idea.
I
could speculate, but I'm not going to.
Okay.
But hemp,
hemp is a big product, though. And it's becoming a big product nowadays as well.
And I think people need to keep their eye on hemp because not only so what happened was and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, when the Farm Bill was signed and it included removing hemp out of Schedule 1 from, the DEA and rescheduling it, it put hemp in a position to just be a billion dollar industry as we all knew it would be. And as I said earlier, my understanding is that American colonists were required by law to grow hemp. Marijuana hemp are different strains of the cannabis sativa L plant.
Right.
And the 2018 Farm Bill defines hemp as any part of the cannabis sativa L plant, which includes the derivatives, the extracts, the oil.
Well, so of course we know hemp is a big deal now. Where is the revenue going to be coming from hemp these days?
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, as hemp re-enters, the consumer mainstream, I've put some thought into this. And because it's been a Scheduled 1 drug along with heroin, which makes no sense.
Not at all.
The bankers and angel investors and financiers have been out of the picture. So my first thought is that now that it's being rescheduled and reclassified, and it's now an agricultural product, it's going to increase, money lending, research. I think private equity firms, venture capitalists are going to come aboard. Investment groups will, take stakes in manufacturing and the selling of hemp-derived products. I mean, in addition to traditional commercial development, of course. But the money's going to be there. There's a lot of private lenders out there. You can find them on LinkedIn. You can find them online. The banks are going to come aboard. So that's the first thought I have is that, with the Farm Bill and everything that's happening with hemp, money is going to be there for the startups, the entrepreneurs, and so on and so forth. And I think the second thing is all the businesses that are going to grow out of the hemp-related industry. And again, because it's being removed from Scheduled 1 and hemp is going to have a new status, a new legal status, it's going to bring aboard accountants and more lawyers. And what about the marketing people, the staffing people? How about the universities and the colleges and all the education that needs to take place behind hemp-related cultivation and all the different uses of hemp? So that's another area, Craig.
I think really what's going to happen is, when you go to the farmer's market and you see a little table set up with some hemp wallets, and if that's what you think hemp is going to be, you are sadly mistaken. It is going to end up being, as you said, $1 billion industry with thousands, literally thousands of different uses for hemp. And Kentucky, like we talked about with Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul, they're at the forefront of the hemp movement in this country, which is interesting.
How about the massive industry of hemp and hemp-derived products? I've already seen it taking place. And again, that is fueled in part by the financing from the investors and all the entrepreneurs. It's going to be there. So, CBD business, we talk about it all the time, is huge. And it's believed to have significant therapeutic benefits without that psychoactive component. And it's going to be a $22 billion industry by 2022, they say.
Yeah.
So there's another great thing. And here's the thing. If you're listening outside of the state of Michigan, the odds are you're in a state or in a country where there's farmland.
Yeah.
And if you're in the United States, especially Michigan, and you know somebody that has hundreds and hundreds of acres, why wouldn't you look into hemp farming? It's an acre, Craig, is going to be worth over the next couple of years tens of thousands of dollars an acre, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 an acre, some say. So why wouldn't you? I actually can if you're in the state of Michigan, I can put you in touch with some individuals who are looking to partake in that farming industry. So I've got a lot of connections. Let me just say that.
Don't you have a lot of land around your house? Couldn't you want to get into that?
No, I don't have any land.
No, I know. Not that kind
like
of
that.
land.
But I do have the attorneys,
right,
and the right people who I can put the listeners in contact with in the state of Michigan. That is who are into hemp farming. So just shoot me an email at Todd Levitt Law Show @gmail.com, and I'll put you in touch with the right people. So there we go, Craig. Hemp is where it's at. Look, we talk about medical marijuana, we talk about recreational marijuana. I'm big on hemp right now, and I don't know if the listeners can kind of hear what I'm trying to say here. Hemp is where it's at.
Here's the other part.
And it's legal. It's legal.
Yes, and you want to know how mainstream hemp is? Monday, February 4th, National Hemp Day in the United States. That has been made a new national holiday. National Hemp Day in the United States is Monday, February 4th, and will now be February 4th from now on, National Hemp Day. So that's how mainstream it's become. It's even got its own national day. It's right up there with Apple Pie Day. Hemp is.
You had to bring up apple pie. Come on, Craig.
Sounds good, doesn't
I'm starving right now.
I know. Hey, when we come back from break, not only do we have to talk about, you got some Michigan law stuff you want to talk about, but also we got to talk about the 420 Canna Expo. We've gone 2 whole segments without talking about the Canna Expo. That's coming up in less than 3 months. We will talk about that when we come back on the Todd L. Levitt Law Show.
This is attorney Todd L. Levitt with an important message.
What's that, Todd?
Craig, mark your calendar. April 20th, 2019, the nation's premier event for everything cannabis and hemp is descending on the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort located right here in Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
What's that, Todd?
420 Canna Expo will feature the industry's most knowledgeable professionals from cultivation, medical, recreational, research, staffing, canna tourism, smoke shops, grow shops, merchandisers, glass makers, and more. Every facet of the industry will be represented on April 20th, 2019 at the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort. For more information on attending, sponsorship, and exhibitor space, log on to 420cannaexpo.com. That's 420cannaexpo.com. And stay tuned to our podcast for more information.
Spell, your eyes they beckon me. Your lips they speak lies and misery. I know it's wrong, but I can't turn away. The flame's drawing near, they're telling me to stay. Into the fire, I'm falling. Into the fire, I'm falling.
Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show, broadcasting and podcasting in the middle of a beautiful hemp field, a federal legal hemp field. Albeit I'm sitting on snow, I'm in the mothership, but I know that hemp would grow underneath the soil if we just put some seedlings in it and just take good care of them, Craig.
And it
The
wasn't
plant
82 below
would grow
zero.
14 feet tall. I'm just saying.
So last week was Tip Up Town in Houghton Lake, and it was cold. And then this week was the polar vortex, and then it's supposed to be in the 50s, at least here in Michigan. And I know the rest of the country is kind of warming up too, which is kind of nice, depending on where you're listening to the show. 75% of the United States was under freezing at some point in the past week. So luckily, they're playing that Super Bowl game in Atlanta in a domed stadium, so they don't have to worry about it. So, Todd, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Michigan law. Let me ask you a question. At your office, what is like some of the biggest questions that people ask about all the new laws and everything that's going on? What are some of the big questions you guys get?
The biggest question now that Michigan's a recreational state, 21 and over, in regards to cannabis consumption is where can I smoke? Where am I allowed to smoke? And if I get behind the wheel of a motor vehicle and I get stopped, do I have immunity or protection? Those are consistently the majority of the questions I get at my office in regards to this. Where can I smoke? Well, let me make this clear. You cannot smoke in a parking lot in a motor vehicle. You cannot smoke in a parking lot in a motor vehicle. You can only smoke in private or on private property. Now, the question is, well, what if I decide I want to open up a business where people can come to the business and have some coffee, invitation only or membership only? Can they smoke in my private business? What do you think, Craig? Compassion club, for instance, like a compassion club.
I would still say it's probably no.
Okay, gray area. Again, we are a legal state, 21 and over. You can smoke in private. So what's to prevent you, Craig, from opening up a business in a city or town in the state of Michigan, and you invite individuals over who pay you a certain amount of money for food or coffee, no alcohol, unless you have a license to sell alcohol.
Right.
And you just gift them some cannabis product in the meantime. I don't see anything wrong with that. Now, am I recommending anybody do that? No. I do think that's one of the gray areas, as we talked about last week on the show, where people are, you can buy books, and along with the books, you get some cannabis products. But that's, again, in the state of Michigan, you cannot smoke in public. It has to be private. So if you have 100 acres, can you go outside your house and smoke? I say you can. It's on private property. It's private.
As long as it's not visible from a public property. Like if I was walking by your property on a sidewalk and I see
you're referring to grow. That's a grow operation. We're talking just recreational consumption of marijuana. Now, obviously, if your neighbor is somebody who doesn't partake in recreational smoking, and you have neighbors right next door to you, and you're out in your backyard, they may try to contact law enforcement. And if you live in one of those towns, and you know what type of town I'm referring to, and they have a nuisance ordinance, then somebody might make a stink. I would fight that on the constitutional grounds, but you know how people are, and you know how towns are. Mm-hmm. More than half the state of Michigan hasn't even opted into the new laws at this point. It's ridiculous. But the big cities have. Lansing, Ann Arbor, Detroit, and Grand Rapids have all opted in. But as far as a motor vehicle, no. And again, how about hotels and motels? That's another question that's come up.
No, you can't smoke them in hotels and motels.
Well, you could if they allow you to.
Well,
if it's private.
Okay.
If it's private and they allow you to, why couldn't you?
Because those are technically public businesses that anybody can go into. I still think it's a great.
Here's my argument. If you own a 6-unit motel and, off the highway somewhere. What's to say you can't allow people to smoke in their private residence, in their rooms? When you pay for a motel or hotel, that's a contract. You have the right to possess that space for a period of time based on what's called consideration under contract law. Now, I would argue if the motel on the side of the highway, and notice I have not said these big hotel chains, because obviously do not smoke in these big hotel chains. I'm just referring to sort of a Canna tourism business.
Right.
If you have a motel that says, look, we'll allow you to smoke in our rooms, we don't have any problem with that. Why couldn't they? Especially if they're medical marijuana card holders as well.
The only thing I would say about a hotel chain is if it was a small chain that happened to be based in a state where recreational marijuana is allowed. Because if you've got a big corporation, let's name a big corporation that owns 5,000 hotels, and they're based in their headquarters in a state that is not a legal marijuana state, one could argue then that falls under the federal government, which of course is still illegal. So you probably shouldn't do that. But a small chain, like say that only had 6 locations in Michigan or Oregon or California, that might be a different story too.
Canna tourism. I'm not recommending anybody who goes to any hotel light up. I'm just giving you an example and some hypotheticals here that when you go and you sign the dotted line for a hotel or motel room, that's a contract. And you're paying what's called, contract 101 out of law school consideration for the use of that space for a period of time. You can lock the door. You could chain the door. That is a private residence that you have dominion and control over. And the other question arises, what are your Fourth Amendment rights when it comes to a motel and hotel room? I would argue that for that period of time, when you have a right to possess it, that you have strong Fourth Amendment rights against illegal search and seizure. That's just my opinion as a defense attorney.
Well, and I'll say this much: do you remember the movie Animal House? Remember that movie?
Of course. Okay. I was in a fraternity, Sigma fraternity, 1984. Exactly.
Well, there's a scene in Animal House where Donald Sutherland and Otter and a couple of the other people from the Delta Chi house, they go to Donald Sutherland, who's a teacher in the movie, and they go to his house and they decide they're gonna smoke. He gets up and he puts the shades down and locks the door, 3 different dead bolts, and turns the lights off, and it's all this secret thing. That's the difference nowadays. You have the right to do it in your residence. You don't have to lock the doors. You don't have to hide anything. In Michigan, if you're over 21, in your legal residence, you can do whatever you want, and if that includes smoking the limit of recreational marijuana you want, you can do that. Like you said, and like people have asked you about the car. The car is a big problem, especially getting behind the wheel after having smoked. That's a bad idea all around.
In the state of Michigan, we have, under the Motor Vehicle Code 257, operating a motor vehicle with a controlled substance. Now, the question is, if marijuana is legal, how do you define that under Michigan law as a controlled substance? I would argue against that. The state of Michigan and a lot of states around the country, the laws and the men and women in the legislatures have not caught up as fast as these laws are being passed. So Michigan has to amend the Motor Vehicle Code to include protections for individuals who participate in recreational cannabis as they have for medical marijuana. And if you and I got behind the wheel, okay, and let's just say I'm a card holder and you're not in the state of Michigan, and we both get pulled over, let's say for going 5 over. The officer approaches the vehicle and says, hey, I smell marijuana, okay, and in fact, you look really intoxicated. He's saying this to you. Well, you're not a card holder. You don't have immunity against prosecution. So there's a chance that you could be pulled out of the car. You could have your blood drawn, which, again, you could argue is a Fourth Amendment invasion into your person, unless you consent or they have a warrant if you refuse. But if I'm a card holder, I have protections against prosecution, and the odds are I'm on my way, as opposed to you being placed under arrest. That's what takes place in the state of Michigan under the Motor Vehicle Code 257 code of operating with the presence of drugs. And how is it a drug when the state has ruled that, and the people have spoken, that it's now recreational? There's no THC levels yet that have been defined. And then, as we've said on past shows, that's an entire argument in itself.
And they're going to have to, and that is part of this whole cannabis industry. There's going to have to be some way for them to detect the THC in your blood and going to have to come up with what is the standard, much like they do with a blood alcohol count. They're going to have to come up with some kind of a unit or some kind of a way to measure it, and going to have to determine what is a legal amount or not in your system, much the same way with blood alcohol. And that means a lot more research. And that means this is still going to, I mean, this is part of the stuff. When we talk about like the 420 Canna Expo that we're doing in Mount Pleasant on 420, you're talking about everything to do with the cannabis business. And this is one of those segments of the business that's going to explode at some point, because you're going to have, as you have more states and more countries making recreational marijuana legal, they have to be ways to test the THC in your blood. And that is a whole industry in its own that could be $1 billion industry as well. And those companies are all going to pay taxes, and they're all going to have to be located somewhere. And this is the good thing about all of this. This is the money that people never think about. If all you think of in cannabis business is, ooh, you're selling marijuana and somebody's paying for it and that's how we're making money. No, there's a whole side industry of products and people. And again, we're going to be focusing a lot of them on at the 420 Canna Expo that are going to be involved, that are offshoots of this that nobody thought of when they decided they were going to make things legal in places.
That's some great points, Craig. And again, for those of you that live in a state, if you or someone you know is operating a motor vehicle with an ignition interlock device installed in the vehicle, if you have any violation whatsoever, make sure you follow all the rules and regulations of the order that allow you to drive with that device in the first place. In Michigan, for instance, if you have a rolling retest violation or a tamper circumvent, or you have a false positive, you need to immediately, within 24 hours, obtain an ETG. Now, there's a lot of listeners out there who have no idea what an ignition interlock device is. Well, I just refer to it as a blow-and-go device.
Sure.
And there's a lot of individuals out there, and there's a lot of states now that if you fall under certain laws and you're convicted under certain statutes, you may be required, in order to keep operating a motor vehicle, to have one of these ignition interlock devices installed in that vehicle that you operate for a period of time. And how it works is, in the morning when you go to start the car, it's going to require you to blow into this device. Now, in Michigan, the law requires that it's a camera device to make sure that you're the one blowing into it. If there's any level above a 0.025 of alcohol in your system, it's going to lock you out. There's also something called a false positive. You can eat certain types of foods and drink certain types of beverages in the morning that will create a one-time reading of a BAC that will soon after be cleared. But in Michigan, within 24 hours, the law is not the law, but the regulations are, according to the state, within 24 hours, you have to get a test that can detect the alcohol in your system dating back 72 hours.
And that's all great advice, because you don't want, if you're already in kind of in hot water with the law to begin with, possibly for doing drinking or driving or stuff like that, you certainly don't want to add on to that. And of course, if you're in any kind of trouble like that and you need legal representation, I happen to know somebody who's very specialized in those things.
Who's that, Craig?
That would be Todd Levitt. 989-772-6000. Todd Levitt. Call his office, call or email and talk to Todd or anybody in his staff. He'll be able to help you out in case you're in any kind of situation like that. Hey, we got to take a break, but when we come back, we will talk about the 420 Canna Expo. We will also talk about places in parts of the country that are delivering pizza with cannabis for the Super Bowl. We'll talk about that when we come back on the Todd L. Levitt Law Show.
This is attorney Todd L. Levitt with an important message.
What's that, Todd?
Craig, mark your calendar. April 20th, 2019, the nation's premier event for everything cannabis and hemp is descending on the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort located right here in Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
What's that, Todd?
420 Canna Expo will feature the industry's most knowledgeable professionals from cultivation, medical, recreational, research, staffing, canna tourism, smoke shops, grow shops, merchandisers, glass makers, and more. Every facet of the industry will be represented on April 20th, 2019 at the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort. For more information on attending, sponsorship, and exhibitor space, log on to 420cannaexpo.com. That's 420cannaexpo.com. And stay tuned to our podcast for more information.
they speak lies and misery. I know it's wrong, but I can't turn away. The flame's drawing near, they're telling me to stay. Into the fire, I'm falling. Into the fire, I'm falling.
Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show, broadcasting from the mothership, the Black Diamond Group mothership, in the middle of the mitten, a beautiful green nutrient field covered by snow and ice, starting to melt with these warm temperatures, Craig. We're in a vortex, freeze last week, and today it's like 50 degrees outside. It's crazy.
First the vortex, then the thaw. That just continues to go on. It'll be going on all winter long. But
Not good for us fat bikers, Big Hair and I, and all the boys from Ohio, and everyone out there that fat bikes. I had my bike at Motorless Motion last week. Mike over there at Motorless in Mount Pleasant does a great job, and I appreciate him. I had to have some of my gears and things tuned up, new chain and whatnot. And I don't like biking in slush. We got the Polar Roll coming up in another week here up in the UP. So not a good thing. We don't want it to melt. We want it to be sort of cozy when we're biking out there. But hey, Craig.
Hey, Todd.
Before we get to 420 Canna Expo, back to the ignition interlock devices that we were talking about last segment. These individuals across the country who do have these installed in their vehicles, they have to go each month for a calibration.
Okay.
And that calibration will determine, how many miles they operated, whether or not there was any alcohol when they were attempting to blow into it, and so on and so forth. And in the state of Michigan, after a period of 1 year, you can petition the state to have it removed from your vehicle. At that time, you are required to obtain a final report. And then, if there's anything negative on the report, one of three things could happen. They could yank it from you and reinstate the denial and revocation that led to you having to use that device in the first place. They could keep you on restricted license for another year with the device, or they can reinstate your driving privileges in full. I've done probably 8,000 of these cases in 25 years. I specialize other than being a defense attorney in alcohol and cannabis cases, anything and everything that has to do with a driver's license and reinstating your driving privileges. So that's just something that I happen to be the man.
Yes, you are. You are the man. And again, like we said before, if you have any problems, any questions, if you ever have any situations, 989-772-6000. Call Todd in his office. And
appreciate that. Michigan, such as other states, if you are behind on your child support, they will yank your driver's license. If you are in an accident and there's a judgment against you and you fail to comply with the financial judgment because your insurance didn't cover it and you were sued in small claims or otherwise, you'll lose your license that way. There's a way to reinstate it, but you will lose your license. So if you're convicted of a drug crime in the state of Michigan without one of those deferral statutes, you will lose your driving privileges. I mean, there are restrictions that are allowed under those circumstances, but there will be a hard suspension for a period of 30 days followed by 5 months on restrictions. There are so many different ways that individuals lose their driving privileges. It's kind of contradictory because, one, the courts and the legal system require these men and women to pay their fines and costs and their child support and everything that comes along with being involved in the justice system. But yet the state has taken their ability to operate a motor vehicle away, making it hard for them to earn a living. Now, look, I was a kid who grew up without a father that never paid child support. So I'm no fan of men and or women who don't pay child support. But again, it makes it hard if somebody is supposed to be supporting a child from a previous marriage if you take their ability to operate a motor vehicle away. So, I understand that as well. Again, I was that kid. I grew up with no child support ever for 18 years, never saw a penny from my contributor of my DNA.
Well, see, and there's the other part of all of this. They always talk about, the tax laws are changing and everything like that, so you need an expert. All of these laws, there's so many different variants of these laws and all that kind of stuff. That's why calling you is the best way to go, because you're the one this is your job. This is what you do. The different ways that people, not only you can help people, but help them get their lives back in order.
Right. I appreciate that. But what I'm telling you and the listeners is, and this happens all over the country, the state our elected officials are supposed to be helping their constituents. And in Michigan, the driving sanctions are so severe that at every turn, you could potentially lose your ability to operate a motor vehicle, thus supporting your family and your loved ones and getting to work and feeling independent. Now, yes, if you do something wrong, there's a penalty to pay. But for whatever reason, Michigan comes down so hard on an individual's ability to keep working and operating with a license. Now, there has been tremendous progress. The driver responsibility fees are no longer an issue. A lot of men and women, thousands, have been able to reinstate their privileges. The recovery and sobriety courts around the state now provide for a restricted license through the state with ignition interlock after phase 1. So there's been tremendous progress, and I applaud, the men and women working hard, especially in the sobriety and recovery courts that support the men and women going through it. But, I'm an advocate. There's a long way to go in getting rid of some of those laws that just burden and hold people back.
That's right. There is a long way to go, but we're getting there. To change gears a second before we get going, and we have to talk about the 420 Canna Expo, but if you happen to be in Oregon, the Mount Hood Cannabis Company going to be delivering cannabis with pizza this Super Bowl Sunday. So if you live in that area and you're thinking, what's better than having some pizza with the game? Maybe having a little bit of cannabis. You can partake in it legally. So enjoy that. The 420 Canna Expo is coming up. Give us an update of what's going on with that.
Well, we got a great lineup of speakers. DJ Short is going to be talking. We're really stoked to have DJ Short talking about breeding and so on and so forth. Attorney Mike Camorn is going to be talking about the hemp farming bill. Dawn Ann, who's a cannabis and advocate and a breast cancer survivor, she's going to be speaking. Dr. Gus Rosania, University of Michigan PhD professor of the science of cannabis. Attorney Denise Policella is going to be talking about owning a cannabis business. So I'm just stoked about that. Heidi Parikh, president of My Compassion, is going to be talking about parenting and pot. And this is free to the public. So 420 Canna Expo, free to the public, Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort on 420. Check out 420cannaexpo.com. And I want to put a disclaimer out there, Craig.
Okay.
You are not going to be allowed to smoke on property.
No.
The casino, and we talked about this last week, it's a no. You cannot smoke on casino property. I'm just going to state that.
Yes, but you can come out and enjoy the event. And again, it's on 420. There'll be more details as we get closer. Also, if you think you want to be a sponsor or an exhibitor, go to 420cannaexpo.com and you can find out more about the 420 Canna Expo. Todd, show's over. I got to get ready for the Super Bowl, man. I got to get my snacks and ready and everything to go.
Craig, you are the man. It was a great show. Have a great Super Bowl weekend. Enjoy the weather. Craig, say it isn't so.
It is so. Show's over. We got to go.
Craig, I got to go. You got to go. Same place, same time next week. Have a great Super Bowl weekend. And don't drink and drive. I'm not just a litigator. I'm an advocator. Take us out with some docking into the fire.
Where I came from, don't wanna see your face no more. You broke my heart, now it's not the same. I'm falling again. I'm falling into the fire.
The Todd Levitt Law Show, brought to you by Chad Mallywell Drilling of Rosebush, Clark Modular Homes, your most experienced and trusted builder in Mount Pleasant, Clear Vision Windows, Siding, Roofing, and Attic Installation of Midland, Mackinac Properties and Northern Michigan Vacation Rentals, buying, selling, and renting properties in the Straits of Mackinac region since 1998, Tim's Collision Plus in Roscommon, Harrison Power Sports, Central Michigan's fastest growing full-line Arctic Cat dealer, and Dr. Robert Townsend and Denali Healthcare for your alternative healthcare needs.
Opinions expressed on this radio program do not necessarily reflect the views of this radio station.